I want you to picture three very distinct scenarios for a second.
Okay.
First, you've got a cat sprinting across a lawn, just entirely zeroed in on a mouse.
Right.
Second, imagine a sunflower out in an open field, and its heavy head is just imperceptibly turning to track the sun from east to west.
Okay. Totally different pace.
Exactly. And third, think about you reaching out for a pan, you accidentally graze the hot burner, and you snatch your hand back long before you even consciously register the pain.
Yeah, that classic flinch.
Right. Now, on the surface, those three events seem to have absolutely nothing to do with each other. I mean,
Well, yeah, they involve entirely different species, for one,
right.
different environments, and like we said, vastly different speeds of execution.
But if we strip away the context,
Yeah.
and just look at the biological blueprints, they're identically brilliant.
They really are.
They're these perfectly automated, highly coordinated responses to changes in the environment. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are exploring the architecture of control and coordination. Our goal here is to figure out how living organisms process information from the world around them and ultimately survive.
Yeah.
Whether they are operating a highly complex central brain or, just managing to thrive with nothing more than leaves and roots.
It presents a really fascinating biological puzzle, honestly, because as human beings, we have this natural tendency to just equate movement with life.
Right. If it moves, it's alive.
Exactly. If we see something moving, we assume it's alive. But not all movement is just, a passive byproduct of a plant or animal physically growing.
Sure.
True control and true coordination require something much more sophisticated. It requires an organism to detect a very specific trigger in the environment and then enact a precise, controlled physical response.
Right. So the cat doesn't just sprint aimlessly.
No, it calculates a trajectory because it detected a mouse.
And you don't just wildly flail your arms when you touch the hot burner.
Hopefully not.
You execute a really precise muscular contraction to pull your hand directly away from the heat source.
Exactly.
So to understand how we actually pull that off, we have to start with the wiring system inside animals.
The nervous system.
Right. We are filled with this incredibly complex electrical highway made up of neurons. And the on-ramps to this highway basically are our sensory receptors.
Yeah, and those receptors are just the specialized tips of our nerve cells. They're stationed strategically all over our bodies, but they're primarily concentrated in our sense organs.
Like the eyes, ears, nose.
Right, so you have gustatory receptors that are specifically tuned to detect taste, and olfactory receptors engineered to detect smell.
Which actually brings up a really fascinating dynamic about how our brain actually builds our perception of the world.
Oh, the sugar thing.
Yes, the sugar experiment. There's this classic experiment from the source text that you can actually try at home. If you put a spoonful of sugar in your mouth, your gustatory receptors instantly detect the sweetness, right?
Right, simple enough.
But if you pinch your nose tightly closed, physically blocking your olfactory receptors from gathering any data, and you eat that exact same sugar, the flavor profile completely changes.
It's wild. And it really demonstrates that our sensory inputs, they just don't operate in isolation.
Yeah.
Your brain is constantly gathering data streams from multiple receptors simultaneously. It relies on both the gustatory chemical input from the tongue and the olfactory chemical input from the nose.
It weaves them together.
Exactly. It weaves them together to create the full, robust experience of flavor. So if you take away one receptor's data, the whole coordinated experience just breaks down.
It perfectly explains why food tastes like cardboard when you have a severe cold.
Yeah, your nose is blocked, so half the data is missing.
Okay, so a receptor detects a change, a smell, a taste, or, intense heat from a stove.
Right.
How does that physical trigger translate into a message that can actually travel through the body? Like, how does it move?
So the information is acquired at the very end of the nerve cell, at this structure called the dendritic tip.
Dendritic tip, okay.
Yeah. If you visualize a neuron, the dendrite looks kind of like a set of branching antennas.
Oh, I see.
And when sensory data hits those antennas, it forces a chemical reaction. That localized chemical reaction then generates an electrical impulse.
So it turns chemistry into electricity.
Exactly. And once created, this electrical impulse travels from the dendrite through the main cell body, and then it shoots down this long, cable-like structure called the axon.
But that axon doesn't just seamlessly plug into the next nerve cell in the chain, right? I mean, there's a physical gap between them.
Correct. That microscopic gap is called a synapse. And it presents a real physiological problem for the body.
Because of the gap.
Right, because electrical impulses cannot simply jump across empty space.
Oh, right.
So when the electrical impulse reaches the very end of the axon, it triggers the release of specialized chemicals.
Back to chemicals.
Yes, it swaps back. These chemicals flood across the synaptic gap. And the moment they make contact with the dendrite of the adjacent neuron on the other side, they spark a brand new electrical impulse.
And then the signal continues down the line.
Exactly.
I always visualize this as like a massive high-speed relay race.
That's a good way to look at it.
You know, you have the electrical impulses acting as runners, and they're sprinting at top speed down the track of the axon.
Right.
But then suddenly they hit a river, which is the synapse, and they physically cannot run across the water.
No, they can't.
So they throw a baton, the chemical signal, across the river to the next runner who's waiting on the opposite bank.
Yes, and that runner catches the baton, converts that energy back into an electrical sprint, and just takes off.
Right.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. That alternating electrochemical relay is how impulses eventually travel from the outer reaches of your nervous system all the way to the muscles or glands to actually trigger an action.
Okay, wait, hold on. If I accidentally touch a burning hot pan and that heat signal has to travel all the way up my arm, doing this elaborate electrochemical relay race across millions of synapse rivers,
Right.
traveling into the dense network of my brain, being analyzed, and then a brand new signal has to travel all the way back down my arm to tell my muscles to pull away. I mean, wouldn't my hand be severely burned before I could even process the pain?
You have zeroed in on the exact reason why the brain is actually a dangerous liability in a physical emergency.
Wait, the brain is a liability?
In a split-second crisis.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
Think about it. The thinking tissue in our body consists of dense, incredibly intricately arranged networks of neurons.
Right.
Conscious thought requires integrating multiple data streams, accessing memories, evaluating options. That complex processing takes time.
Because it's doing so much.
Exactly. If you had to consciously think, my hand is experiencing extreme heat, tissue damage is imminent, I should probably contract my bicep to pull away.
You'd be cooked.
You would suffer third-degree burns before you even finish the thought.
Okay, so how does the body bypass that delay?
Through this evolutionary workaround called the reflex arc.
The reflex arc.
Yeah. The nervous system solves the speed problem by completely cutting the brain out of the loop during these critical emergencies.
It just bypasses the brain entirely.
Entirely. So nerves from all over your body travel up your limbs, right? And they meet in this dense bundle within your spinal cord on their way up to the brain.
Like a central highway.
Exactly. In a reflex arc, the sensory nerve that detects the extreme heat meets a motor nerve that controls your arm muscle directly inside the spinal cord.
Oh, wow.
They form an immediate, hardwired shortcut.
So the spinal cord acts like a hyper-vigilant bodyguard.
That's exactly what it is.
It makes the executive decision and physically moves you out of the way before you even know the danger exists.
Precisely. The sensory input comes in, hits the spinal cord, and loops right back out as an output action to the muscle.
Without asking the brain for permission.
Right. Now, the information still travels up the spinal cord to the brain, which is why you eventually feel the pain and realize what just happened.
Oh, so you get the pain a second later.
Yes. But by the time your brain consciously registers the event, your hand is already safe. Reflex arcs evolved because conscious thought is just a luxury we simply cannot afford in sudden danger.
Which is absolutely brilliant for survival.
Right.
But obviously, we are not just a bundle of automated reflexes bouncing away from hot stoves.
No, thankfully not.
We are highly conscious beings. We plan, we build things, we make decisions.
Which brings us further up the spine to the primary command center.
The brain.
Right. We operate using a central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord, which receives and integrates all this information.
Okay.
And then we have the peripheral nervous system, made up of the cranial and spinal nerves, which act as the communication lines bridging that central system to the furthest reaches of the body.
So if the central nervous system is the ultimate command center, I imagine it has to be highly compartmentalized.
Oh, extremely.
Because you wouldn't want the area of the brain responsible for, like, recalling a childhood memory getting mixed up with the area responsible for keeping your heart beating.
No, that would be a disaster.
Yeah.
The compartmentalization is incredibly strict. The brain is broadly structured into three main regions: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain.
Okay, let's break those down.
Sure. So the forebrain is the primary thinking architecture. This is where sensory impulses are received, mapped, and interpreted.
So this is the conscious stuff.
Exactly. It handles all voluntary movements.
Yeah.
This region is constantly weaving together what you see, what you hear, and the data stored in your memory to formulate decisions.
So if I decide I want to reach out and pick up a cup of coffee, my forebrain is running that entire calculation.
Yes. And interestingly, the forebrain also houses a highly specific center dedicated solely to hunger.
Wait, really? Hunger is in the thinking brain?
Yeah. The physical sensation of knowing you are full detecting that your body has actually acquired enough nutrients is processed by a distinct cluster of neurons right there in the forebrain.
That's fascinating. But what about the vital functions we never have to think about, like breathing or heart rate?
That territory belongs to the midbrain and the hindbrain. They manage all the involuntary actions that basically keep the biological machine running.
The background processes.
Right. Within the hindbrain, there is a structure called the medulla, and the medulla controls your baseline survival metrics, your blood pressure, your salivation, and even the vomiting reflex.
I mean, it makes sense that vomiting is managed by the primitive brainstem. It's this involuntary purge mechanism to protect the system from ingested toxins.
Yeah, exactly.
You definitely don't want to have to consciously decide to eject poison. You just want it gone.
Exactly. It needs to be automatic. Also situated in the hindbrain is the cerebellum.
The cerebellum, okay, what does that do?
Well, while the forebrain might initiate the conscious decision to pick up that cup of coffee, the cerebellum is responsible for the actual precision of that action.
Oh, the fine motor skills.
Right. It maintains posture and balance. So whether you are walking a tightrope, riding a bicycle, or just trying to lift a mug without spilling it, the cerebellum acts as the fine-tuning dial. It ensures the movement is perfectly smooth and balanced.
Okay, but given that this incredibly delicate tissue manages everything from our deepest memories to our core blood pressure, the physical protection surrounding it must be extreme.
Oh, it is guarded like a fortress.
I'd hope so.
The brain is obviously housed inside the rigid bony structure of the skull.
Right.
But bone alone actually isn't enough. If you suffered a sudden impact, the delicate brain tissue would just smash directly against the hard interior of the skull.
Like a concussion.
Yeah, or worse.
Yeah.
So to dissipate that kinetic energy, the brain is suspended inside a shock-absorbing, fluid-filled balloon.
Ah, the cerebrospinal fluid.
Exactly. This fluid acts as a hydraulic dampener, and the spinal cord is similarly armored, threaded safely through the hard, bony rings of the vertebral column.
Okay, so we have this beautifully protected command center, right? And we have electrical impulses flying down the axon highways. But I really want to look at the physical outputs.
The muscles.
Yeah. The brain sends the instruction down the nerve, the impulse hits the muscle, but how does the actual muscle fiber move? Because we don't have, like, tiny biological pulleys or miniature engines inside our arms pulling levers.
No, they don't. The mechanism is entirely chemical, and it happens at a microscopic scale.
Okay.
So muscle cells contain very specialized proteins.
Right.
And when those proteins are struck by an electrical nervous impulse, the electrical charge literally alters their chemistry.
It changes their chemistry.
Yes, it causes them to change both their physical shape and their geometric arrangement within the cell.
That's wild. The proteins themselves dynamically change shape just in response to electricity.
Yeah, they do. The electrical signal forces a new arrangement of these proteins, which causes them to slide past one another and overlap.
Oh, I see.
And this internal shifting causes the entire muscle cell to shorten.
Okay, so it condenses.
Right. And when millions of these microscopic cells shorten at the exact same millisecond, the gross muscle tissue contracts. That coordinated cellular contraction is what actually pulls on your bones and moves your skeleton.
So it is just a massive, highly coordinated, shape-shifting event happening at the cellular level.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Now, we've seen how animals pull this off. We use complex brains, high-speed reflex arcs, and these shape-shifting muscle proteins.
Right.
But if we look completely outside the animal kingdom, we run into a massive biological puzzle. Think about a plant.
Oh, yeah.
Plants clearly respond to their environment, but how do you achieve coordinated movement if you don't have a brain, you don't have a spinal cord, and you don't possess a single muscle protein?
It forces us to look at completely different biological mechanisms.
Yeah.
Because plants still execute controlled movements, they just rely on an entirely alternative set of tools.
Right. Let's examine the fast responses first.
Okay.
Because we see this brilliantly in the chumui, which is commonly known as the sensitive plant or the touch-me-not plant.
Right, the one that folds up.
Exactly. If you just brush your finger against its leaves, the leaflets instantly fold inward and droop. It is a rapid, immediate physical reaction.
Very dramatic.
But there is no nervous system, and there are no muscle cells. How does a leaf instantly collapse on command?
Well, surprisingly, plants actually utilize electrical chemical means to convey information from cell to cell, very similar to animals,
Really? Even without neurons?
even without specialized neuron networks, yeah. The signal that a touch has occurred propagates rapidly through the tissue. But the real ingenuity lies in the execution of the movement itself.
Because they don't have those shape-shifting proteins.
Right. Instead of relying on muscle proteins to change shape, plant cells orchestrate movement by manipulating water.
Oh, they use hydraulics.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It all comes down to turgor pressure.
Ergo pressure.
Right. When the electrical chemical signal reaches the specialized cells at the base of the leaf, those cells rapidly alter the amount of water contained inside them.
Okay.
They actively expel water, effectively deflating.
Like letting the air out of a tire.
Exactly. And as these cellular water balloons suddenly shrink on one side of the leaf base, that sudden loss of pressure physically forces the leaf to fold and droop.
That is so clever. It's literally shifting water pressure from one side of a cellular joint to another to force a mechanical movement.
It's incredibly efficient.
But that explains a rapid defensive response. Plants are obviously much more famous for their slow, deliberate movements.
Right, the growth movements.
Like a sunflower tracking the sun across the sky, or a vine wrapping around a chain-link fence.
Yeah, so those slow, deliberate movements are driven by growth, and they're scientifically classified as tropisms.
Tropisms.
Right. Unlike the sensitive plant, which merely shifts water to move its existing structure, a tropism requires the plant to actually synthesize new tissue in a specific direction in response to an environmental trigger.
The classic example being a pea plant tendril making contact with a fence and circling around it.
Yes. So when a climbing tendril touches a physical support, the side of the tendril that's in direct contact with the fence actually grows at a significantly slower rate than the side facing away.
Oh, wait. So the outside grows faster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the outside edge is growing longer and faster than the inside edge, the physical structure naturally curves inward.
Which forces it to circle and cling to the object.
Exactly.
And there are multiple variations of these directional growth responses, right, depending on the environmental trigger.
Oh, definitely. Geotropism is the response to gravity. If you plant a germinating seed completely upside down, the roots will always exhibit positive geotropism, meaning they detect gravity and grow downward.
Even if they start out pointing up.
Right. Meanwhile, the shoots display negative geotropism, stubbornly growing upward and away from the gravitational pull.
And then we have phototropism, which dictates movement toward light,
Right.
like the sunflower tracking the sun, or, a houseplant severely bending its stem to reach the only window in a dark room.
Exactly. There's also hydrotropism, which directs the movement of roots toward hidden water sources deep underground.
Seeking out water.
And chemotropism. A vital example of chemotropism is the growth of pollen tubes downward toward ovules to facilitate reproduction. And that's guided entirely by specific chemical gradients.
Which perfectly highlights a major limitation in biological communication, actually.
How so?
Well, electrical impulses, like the ones triggering the sensitive plant to fold, or our own reflex arcs, they're incredibly fast.
Unmatched speed. What?
But they have strict physiological limits. They only reach the exact cells they are physically wired to. Furthermore, a biological cell requires time to reset its internal mechanisms after firing an impulse.
Right, there's a refractory period.
It cannot simply fire continuously?
No, it can't. Electrical impulses are basically designed for sprint communication. They are unmatched for immediate localized reactions, but they are highly inefficient for long-term, widespread coordination.
Like a marathon.
Right. If a plant needs to instruct its entire stem to bend toward a light source, or an animal needs to prepare its entire cardiovascular system for a physical fight, electrical impulses are just inadequate. You need a mechanism for a system-wide broadcast.
Right. So if the electrical impulse is like a direct private text message to one specific coworker warning them about a problem, hormones are the chemical equivalent of a company-wide email blast.
That's an excellent way to conceptualize it.
The chemical signal takes a little bit longer to circulate, but it reaches absolutely every single cell in the system, and the message persists, steadily influencing the entire organism's behavior for hours.
Yet the difference in scope and duration is massive.
Yeah.
And plants rely almost entirely on these chemical females, these hormones, to coordinate their growth and their environmental responses.
Let's trace the mechanics of a plant bending toward the light then. How does a chemical physically alter the architecture of a stem?
So phototropism is largely driven by a plant hormone called auxin. Right. Auxin is continuously synthesized at the very tip of the growing shoot. Now, when sunlight strikes one side of the plant, the auxin actually diffuses away from the light and concentrates heavily on the shady side of the shoot.
Wait, the hormone actively migrates to the shadows.
It does. And wherever auxin accumulates in high concentrations, it stimulates those specific cells to grow longer.
Ah, I see.
So the cells in the shade elongate at an accelerated rate compared to the cells in the direct sun.
And this uneven elongation physically bows the entire plant stem toward the light source.
Exactly.
That is fascinating. It's the exact same geometric principle as the pea plant wrapping around the fence, stretching the outside edge to force a curve.
Yep, same mechanics.
And plants utilize an entire suite of these chemical directors, right?
Definitely. You've got gibberellins, which coordinate the overall vertical growth of the stem,
Okay.
and cytokinins, which actively promote rapid cell division, which explains why you find highly concentrated levels of them in fruits and seeds, where explosive growth is required.
But ultimate coordination isn't just about endless growth. I mean, a stable system must also know when to halt production.
Absolutely. So plants synthesize hormones like abscisic acid, which actively inhibits growth.
It's the brakes.
It is the chemical signal responsible for shutting down systems, causing the wilting and dropping of leaves when winter approaches or resources become scarce.
Now, if we bring this concept of the system-wide chemical broadcast back to animals, we see how vital it is for survival.
Oh, it's essential.
Imagine you suddenly encounter a severe threat. Say, a predator appears in your path. You instantly transition into a fight-or-flight scenario.
Right, and fighting for your life or sprinting at maximum speed are enormously complicated, energy-intensive physiological demands.
You need everything working together.
Exactly. If you relied solely on isolated nerve cells, you could not effectively prepare the entire body simultaneously. You require a chemical override to enact massive systemic changes.
And in humans and other animals, this is executed by the endocrine system.
Yes, primarily initiated by the hormone adrenaline.
Adrenaline acts as the ultimate biological triage mechanism, doesn't it?
It really does. Adrenaline is secreted directly from the adrenal glands into the bloodstream. Because it utilizes the blood as a highway, it rapidly reaches target organs all over the body.
Like the heart.
It impacts the heart immediately, commanding it to beat faster to pump massive amounts of oxygen-rich blood toward the muscles.
And it doesn't just pump more blood, it actively reroutes the existing supply.
Exactly. Small arteries surrounding your digestive system and your skin physically contract. This severely restricts blood flow to those areas.
Because when you are running from a predator, you do not need to waste energy digesting your lunch.
Exactly. That blood is diverted directly to the skeletal muscles where it is urgently needed.
Wow.
Simultaneously, adrenaline commands the diaphragm and rib muscles to contract faster, spiking your breathing rate. All of these disparate systems act in concert, perfectly preparing the biological machine to survive.
It is a ruthless prioritization of resources.
Very ruthless.
And while adrenaline handles the spectacular emergencies, the endocrine system is constantly managing the quiet, daily maintenance of the body, too.
Yeah, the day-to-day stuff.
You have thyroxin, synthesized by the thyroid gland, which acts as the thermostat for your baseline metabolism. It regulates how your body processes carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
Right.
And thyroxin fundamentally requires iodine to be manufactured. If your diet lacks iodine, the thyroid cannot synthesize the hormone, which leads to a goiter, a severe swelling of the neck as the gland overworks itself trying to compensate.
The endocrine system orchestrates nearly every phase of life. The pituitary gland secretes growth hormone, precisely regulating skeletal and muscular development.
And a deficiency during childhood results in dwarfism, while an oversecretion can cause gigantism.
Yes. And later, hormones like testosterone in males and estrogen in females drive the sweeping, systemic physical changes associated with puberty.
But the true elegance of chemical coordination lies in its autonomy.
What do you mean?
Well, the body regulates these chemicals through incredibly precise feedback loops. We see this perfectly demonstrated with insulin.
Yes. Insulin is produced by the pancreas to strictly regulate the concentration of sugar in your blood.
Right.
But the pancreas doesn't just blindly secrete a steady stream of insulin all day. It operates as an autonomous sensor.
Like a thermostat.
Exactly.
Mhm.
When you consume a meal and your blood sugar levels spike, specialized cells within the pancreas detect that precise rise and respond by actively manufacturing and releasing more insulin into the bloodstream.
And as the insulin circulates, doing its job of helping cells absorb that sugar, the blood sugar levels naturally begin to fall.
And as soon as the levels drop, the pancreas detects the change and immediately scales back the insulin secretion. The timing, the quantity, and the duration of the chemical release are perfectly balanced to maintain a flawless internal equilibrium.
When you step back and view the entire architecture, it is staggering. We've traced the lightning-fast reflex arc shortcutting through the spinal cord to instantly save tissue from a burn. We've explored a plant-shifting microscopic cellular water pressure to fold a leaf on command. And we've seen the slow, steady, flawlessly timed release of hormones, rerouting our blood flow and keeping our internal chemistry perfectly balanced.
It fundamentally reframes how we view living organisms. Life isn't merely defined by movement, it is defined by the correct movement, executed at exactly the right millisecond, orchestrated by interlocking systems of breathtaking automated complexity.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But as always, we want to leave you with a lingering thought to explore on your own.
Right, so the sensation of hunger, the sudden reflex to pull away from a flame, the slow elongation of our bones, and the profound heart-pounding terror of a fight-or-flight response are all ultimately just the results of perfectly timed electrical impulses, refolding proteins, and chemical feedback loops.
Yeah.
Are we just incredibly complex, wet biological machines? And if science eventually maps every single chemical gradient and electrical pathway in the human body, could human reactions, and perhaps even choices, be perfectly programmed and predicted, just like a piece of software?
The next time you pull your hand away from a hot stove or watch a sunflower slowly track the sun, ask yourself who or what is actually in control. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.